Hello, welcome back to another episode of MC Airsoft. I'm Mark, and today we're going to be discussing high caps versus mid caps. Now, to start off, we're going to discuss a little bit of what do I consider a high cap versus what do I consider a mid cap. Because to me, it's more about the mechanical structuring of the magazine rather than how many rounds that it holds. A 50 round a high cap for a pistol might be a high capacity, whereas a 30 round mid cap or 50 round mid cap for an AEG is a mid cap. So it's not so much about the amount of ammo that it carries, because that's going to vary from platform to platform. If you're running a 308 based platform, you're going to have more onboard capacity with a high cap than if you're running a 5.56 high cap. Generally, there's going to be a discrepancy of about 100 or so rounds, right? So then you have your AK platform versus your M4 platform. There's a discrepancy in mid caps and high caps. Generally speaking, the AK has a bigger magazine, holds more ammo. Then there's mid caps that hold 80. There's for M4s. There's mid caps that hold 100 or 210 or more for mid caps. So it's not so much about the capacity as it is about the mechanical structuring or principles of the magazine, right? So we have two examples: mid cap and high cap. So what's the difference? Well, we'll start with what is a high cap, or what am I calling a high cap. That is a magazine with a reservoir and a feeding chamber, and generally speaking it has some kind of windy wheel on the bottom. Whereas a mid cap, or standard capacity, but we're really just talking about mid caps today, because if you're using standard capacity, well, you know what you're getting yourself into. You're probably going to milsim games and things like that. But for mid caps, what we're talking about is a spring-fed constant pressure magazine, meaning that as you load the BBs in, it goes down a track, pushes back a spring, winds itself through the magazine, and as you're shooting your airsoft gun, it will uncoil that spring and feed the BBs at a continuous rate. So why do a lot of new players start with high caps? That's pretty simple. Comes with the gun, right? Why should I, as a new player, go out and buy mid-cap magazines if I'm new to the sport over the high cap that came with my gun? Because this one holds 120 or whatever. This one holds probably about 400 because it's an extended high cap. So why should I go out and buy mid caps versus a high cap? Because one, like I said, this comes with the gun. Two, this can hold as many rounds as maybe 4 mid caps, maybe less, maybe more, depending on the mid caps you're getting. But why then I need a chest rig or a belt system or a plate carrier or something to hold extra magazines so they don't fall out as I'm running around, or so I can access them easier, things like that. And it's just an expense that you get into, right? Well, one of the biggest benefits to mid caps is, like I said, this holds about 120 rounds, and it will feed, hopefully, those 120 rounds reliably without me having to intervene, right? With a high cap, and again, we're defining a high cap mostly by this wheel on the bottom and the reservoir in the back. With a high cap, every 20, 30, maybe more, maybe less shots, generally speaking, it is determined by the spring tension and the length of your track going into the airsoft gun. And I do understand that there are high capacity magazines that claim to be able to feed an entire magazine on a single wind. I'm not really hitting on those, and I haven't tested any of those out. I'm going for the standard high capacity magazines that you're probably going to see, and it's probably going to come free with your gun. So every 20, 30, maybe 50 rounds, I'm going to have to sit there, rewind it, which makes an annoying noise, or use a tool to wind it or something of that nature. It's an audible signal to my opponents that, hey, I'm out of ammo, I need to reload, right? Not only that, but these things turn into a maraca when they're less than full. So if I'm re-indexing magazines, say I play half a game, or I kill one person, or get a couple kills, whatever the case is, and I want to take this out of my gun, swap it out to a fresh magazine so I have the full 400 or whatever rounds on board, and these are going to shake like maraca, right? And also being stored upside down, which is how you should store your magazines, so they don't get dirt and debris in them. If they're stored upside down, they can unload themselves based on that spring tension, right? Because now the reservoir of BBs is going away from it, and it's going to start to unload itself. It might even unwind itself. Some of the cheaper high caps do that. Versus a mid-capacity magazine, if I throw it in my rifle, no big deal. I have 120 rounds, and if I have a reliable magazine, it will feed 120 rounds consistently without my intervention. When that's done, I reload, put a new magazine in it, and I got another 120 rounds. I reload, put a new magazine in it, got another 120 rounds. Versus this thing, which has an undetermined amount of ammo, in its track and under spring tension, and I can't re-index. So, for instance, I was playing a game yesterday where I started off with one mag in the gun, obviously, got a few kills, cycled out to the next magazine by dropping this in a cargo pocket, pulled out another magazine, put it in the gun, kept firing. When I knew that I kind of fired more than the previous one, I took that one out, re-indexed that into a pocket, threw in the old one, kind of went back through there. So I was cycling back and forth between the two magazines. Now I could have gone to a third one, it's an option. During a longer game, I probably would have. But none of the magazines were rattling, none of them were making extra noise, and I knew that if I pulled it out of my pocket and shoved it in the gun, it would start firing, no problems. Whereas you can't really do that with high capacity magazines. Another advantage, which a lot of people don't think of, but it is very prevalent in CQB, is these will feed upside down and at any angle. So if I am moving through a CQB area and I'm tilting my gun around corners and doing other things like that, or maybe I have to get down underneath a car to shoot underneath a car, hit people in the legs, whatever kind of Hollywood crap that you see in the movies, right? Which some of it is applicable, don't get me wrong, but most of it is just Hollywood crap, right? But the mid-cap magazines will feed at any angle, no issue, whereas the high-capacity magazines will not. Because like I said, if you tilt it at bad angles, or even if it's upside down, like you put it back in your vest or what have you, it can unwind itself and the BBs in the reservoir will move away from the feeding wheel. So that's some downsides to it. Another downside is a lot of, if you go to the bigger events, if you go to like milsims and things like that, if you're not running a SAW or the events that allow submachine gun classes, you will probably not be allowed to use high capacity magazines. For various reasons, immersions and all that crap, but just keep that in mind that if you want to do that kind of stuff, you are going to need mid-cap magazines. So another point to make about them is these retail for $35, $40, somewhere in that range. These retail for, I think I got these for under $8. I think it was about $8 with taxes. So I can buy almost 5 of these for the price of this magazine over here. So that can be an issue as well, because not only, yes, you can think about it in terms of, well, this magazine, the Highcap, holds 4 times the amount as the Midcap, or what have you. So why not just get the 1 of these or 2 of these for every, however many I can get of these? Well, so the problem then is, if you've been playing Airsoft for a long time, you lose magazines. It's one thing if you play at a CQB only, like indoor only arena, you're probably going to be able to get your magazines back. But if you are playing outdoors, or if you're playing in a bigger environment, or if you don't necessarily trust the people you're playing with, having a cheaper magazine that literally I can toss to another player, if I don't get it back, I'm out $8. If I drop it on the ground, or if it does fall out of my chest rig, my dump pouch, my pocket, whatever the case is, or I do a speed reload and forget to pick it up, well, I'm out $8. No big deal, right? Yes, that adds up over time, but realistically, if you can afford a gun, you can afford all the gear that goes with it, you can afford to feed the thing BBs, you can afford all these other things. If you lose a magazine a month kind of thing, or a magazine every 2 months or whatever, it's not that big of a deal. And if you're like me, I spray paint the magazines I use, camouflage, to match my Mark 12. Because one, Mark 12s aren't very common. So it's not likely that other people are going to mistakenly grab my rifle. And if it does get snatched out of a gear bag or something like that, I can easily identify it as mine, right? Especially because the camo pattern matches. 2, since the magazines match my rifle, and no doubt in anyone's mind, if you look at these in the Mark 12, which I should have brought in from my car, but like I said, I played Airsoft last night and just forgot to bring them in. There's no doubt in anyone's minds that if I show someone my rifle and my magazine, this is my magazine, because it matches. In color, in print, in texture for the camouflage, and all sorts of things. So, but that being said, even if I'm running all black or all tan or whatever, if I lose a Midcap, not that big of a deal. I'm not using PTS Midcaps, so they're not $20 a piece, right? They're, like I said, in the range of $8. So that's another major thing to consider. So as you get more into Airsoft, you're probably going to want to move away from the high caps. Your starting gun using a high capacity magazine, that's just fine. That's no problem for most people. But Midcaps, in my opinion, are a much better option. If you're getting a little more serious, you don't mind wearing a little bit of gear, whether that's a belt or a chest rig or plate carrier or whatever. If you're getting more into Airsoft, you're probably going to want to buy some Midcaps and a decent speed loader to go with it. Personally, I still use the cheapo, M9 style speed loaders. They work for me, and if I lose it, if I give it away, I'm out next to nothing. So yeah, that's about all I wanted to say today on high caps versus mid caps. Again, I definitely recommend getting some good quality mid caps, but that decision is largely going to be up to you. So until next time, stay safe and stay hydrated.